Welcome to the 212th episode of the Reading and Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Rutherford. Stay tuned for my interview with thriller author Shane Kuhn, author of The Intern's Handbook and Hostile Takeover. Stay tuned for the interview. Welcome back to the Reading and Writing Podcast. My guest today is Shane Kuhn, author of the thriller novel Hostile Takeover. Kuhn's first novel, The Intern's Handbook, received a lot of great critical praise and was a bestseller. Shane, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. Well, can you read the first two or three pages from your new novel, Hostile Takeover?
Yes, no problem. This is from chapter 4. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join. I'm sorry, I never got your names. That's because we didn't give them to you, I said coldly. Come on, Padre, let's move it along, Alice said. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this couple in holy matrimony. Our wedding was a relatively small affair. Like most professional killers, we had no family or friends of any kind, so the guest list was a snap. John, check. Alice, check. Non-denominational, guitar-playing ex-convict minister who didn't ask a lot of questions. Check. Smartly dressed hotel staffer poised to toss Juliet rose petals and pop a bottle of 1907 Heidsieck champagne, recovered from the Swedish freighter Jan Kopping, after it was sunk by a German U-boat in 1916, something old, upon completion of nuptials. Check. All weddings should be like ours was. The bride and groom, solitary as their cake-topper doppelgangers, grinning before Yahweh in bespoke couture. Even though we spared the guest list, we spared no expense. The ceremony took place in the Ty Warner penthouse at the Four Seasons in Manhattan. For the price of one night's lodging in that room, you could feed and clothe several villages in Myanmar for a full year. Alice looked stunning in her handmade jet black wedding gown, something new, that I had a goth seamstress fashion out of exotic military fabrics. It cost me a small fortune and nearly my pinky finger, but it was worth it. That dress made me want to cut my own heart out and bleed on the sacrificial stone to show my gratitude to the gods. And after all that, I couldn't wait to unceremoniously rip it off her. I was wearing a tuxedo I stole from a dead MI6 agent, possibly my best dressed target, and a pair of Vietnam-era jungle combat boots I won in a card game before I killed a room full of Laotian flesh peddlers with a camp shovel. Alice wasn't into the boots, but I told her letting me wear them was the least she could do after she had tried several times in the last year to put a bullet in my head, but only managed to hit my heel. She one-upped me by wearing a pair of Alexander McQueen Titanic ballerina pumps she'd had fitted with a razor-sharp titanium stiletto heel that could lacerate Kevlar and punch through concrete. They were wickedly beautiful, and I couldn't help but wonder how they would look pointing at the ceiling. Do you take her to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Alice said. Seriously, I said, annoyed. It's not your turn. Why don't we try that again, the minister said. No, Alice glared. Don't ruin the moment, I said. I don't like the rest of those tired, played-out vows, Alice said. To having to hold in sickness and in health till death do us part. Those, I inquired casually. Yep, she snapped, strangling her exquisite saffron crocus bouquet. Fine, what do you suggest? There's a very rare bottle of champagne that has waited patiently at the bottom of the ocean off the coast of Finland for nearly 100 years for us to drink it, she began. We have actual kush, fresh off the plane from Islamabad, and the Maine lobsters are going to kill each other if we don't kill them first. And let's not forget, I'm so horny I could fuck a mechanical bull. So with all of these more urgent matters, why do we need to go through this ritual nonsense? I do, I said. We're not there yet, the minister said, annoyed. Shh, Alice said, pressing her finger to his lips too hard and slightly cutting him with what I could see was a French manicured nail with a razor-sharp rose gold edge, adding an instant upgrade to my shoe fantasy. In the interest of expediting the fulfillment of that fantasy, I kissed the bride. The minister scowled and lit a cigarette while we made out like high school prom dates. I now pronounce you man and wife. Hands everywhere, groping, outside voices. Okay, I'm out of here, the minister said. Congratulations, you two were made for each other. He took leave of us, along with the hotel staffers, and we took leave of our senses. Just think Bacchanal meets Masters and Johnson, meets Penthouse Letters, and you pretty much got the picture. After several hours of marital consummation, we put our beautiful wedding clothes back on and had a smoke on the terrace. Promise me we'll have sex like that for the rest of our lives, no matter how old, gray, and foul-smelling we are, she said. No way, I said. Maybe if we were chimpanzees on some kind of experimental military drug. Outside of that, I'd be dead in 5 years if we kept up this pace. Maybe that's my fiendish plan, to fuck you to death. Okay, I promise. We both laughed, mainly because the irony of the situation was as thick as our Sylvia Weinstock wedding cake and twice as sweet. I married the love of my life and former nemesis. We had the most beautiful wedding two totally disconnected psychopaths could possibly have had. We enjoyed unspeakable pleasures, and then it was time for the pièce de résistance, my wedding present to Alice. I opened the doors to the foyer, yes, the suite was that big, and revealed a massive, beautifully wrapped box about the size of a coffin. What is it, she said, licking her lips. Open it and find out. She tore off the wrapping paper and lifted the lid off the box. Her jaw dropped. Holy shit, John. That's only the beginning. Excuse me, she said, incredulous. This is a two-part present. What's part two? Are you sure you're ready? I asked coyly. Don't make me shoot you in your other foot. I looked at my watch. 20 minutes and all will be revealed. Enough time for champagne. We popped the shipwrecked Heidsick and toasted. It tasted like unbridled optimism, with a gunpowder nose and a burnt lemon and kerosene finish. After we practically sucked the last drop out of the bottle, we kissed, tasting victory on each other's malevolent lips. And that's it.
That's great. Well, if someone listening hasn't heard about Hostile Takeover yet, how would you describe your new novel?
You know, how I describe it. It seems to be evolving every day, but I think the way I am really liking to describe it now is I really feel like it's an explosive love story. You know, because like the more I sort of think about the process that went into writing it, what I really gravitated to was John and Alice and their relationship. And when you read the book, you'll see that the narrative really tracks with their relationship. You know, there's a lot of plot. There are a lot of plot elements that are there along the way that move the story along. But if you look at it, you'll see that the narrative is really driven by their love story. So that's what I would call it. I would call it an explosive love story.
Gotcha. Well, do you remember the original idea or impetus that led you to writing about John Lago, the protagonist of Hostile Takeover in your first novel, The Intern's Handbook?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a long story, but I'll try to make it as brief as I can. I mean, basically, for years, you know, I worked in, you know, film and television for many years. And for all of those years, including before that, I've always loved assassin stories. And I've seen, you know, most of the great assassin movies. And so I've been fairly obsessed with that genre and that type of character. So I was always motivated to write a great assassin character in the context of a great assassin story. But the problem was finding something unique. You know, that a lot of this is not an uncommon story to tell. There are many, you know, books and movies about the subject and these types of characters. But for me, it was important that it would be a completely original character. So I tried and failed many times to sort of kick something like this off in my career as a writer, and never really got anywhere until about, I think it was around just after like 2008 and the financial crises that we were all dealing with. I became obsessed. I use the word obsessed a lot. I became obsessed with corporate crime, and I think a lot of people did. You know, as in the movie business, everybody was, you know, trying to create television shows and movies about that subject. For me, it was interesting because as also a person who loves movies and books about organized crime, it occurred to me that corporate crime is the most powerful and dangerous sort of cartel, if you will, in the world, because, you know, who else? The mafia isn't even capable of pillaging an entire retirement fund and then getting packaged out with a $40 million severance package. So thinking about that, I really wanted to do. I was actually working on a television show that was about that. It was about corporate, basically white collar, people who decide to start this organized crime family of their own, and they're not even mafia. So I was working on that, and as you're working something like that with the crime, sort of organized crime paradigm, thinking about the different stratum of people involved in the organization, from the bosses all the way down to the minions. And I started thinking about the minions because the interns themselves have always been kind of a funny thing to me. I've been an intern many times. I always thought it was kind of a hilarious, weird position. So as I was thinking about this show, I thought, what would the interns be doing, in this kind of organized crime scenario? And I think the instinct for most anybody would be that they're the minions. They're the ones who are going around doing the dirty work. But I actually thought more about it, and I wanted to subvert that. I often like to do that within storytelling. So I basically wanted to empower them. I wanted to make them, not what you think they are. I wanted to make them kind of the people running the show. And that's when it clicked, that they could be assassins, because, to me, within that kind of organized crime scenario, or just crime in general, I can't imagine a more powerful character than an assassin. I feel like assassins are very powerful for the same reason that I really like those characters, and that is because they don't live by any rules. They don't have to. The police are not a problem for them. General society is not a problem for them. So that was where it all clicked, and I thought, wow, okay, that could be cool if interns were assassins. And then after that, it just kind of really came together, because I started to think about, like John. He came into my mind as the character, and at the time I pictured him as Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And so he kind of just developed in my head. And that's kind of one way that I like to write, is it's kind of like method acting. I just start kind of living in a character and thinking about what they would be doing about a lot of different scenarios. And it just kind of expanded from there, because I felt like, conceptually I had a great idea. And then working on John, I really did want him to be kind of a blank slate character who had to kind of invent his own life. And it just evolved from there. So it's kind of a long story, but it's kind of the idea really comes out of it's kind of a love child between my love of assassin stories and also, the concept of interns and internships.
Right. So I know that you mentioned that you did work in film and TV.
Yeah.
Did the Intern's Handbook start out as a script?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, it was kind of an interesting situation, because I started outlining it as a script, and at the time, I was working on a project, because I've worked with a writing partner for years, and at the time we were working on a project, and it was extremely frustrating. I mean, it was one of the most frustrating things I've ever done, not even just work-wise or creatively, just in general in life. It was one of the most frustrating, time-wasting situations I've ever been in. And so I was really at the time I was outlining Interns, I was really down on the entertainment business, because I'd literally been put through the ringer for this project, and many promises were made. And of course I stupidly believed them, even though after years I, experienced them never coming true. But it was really a situation that seemed like something was going to happen. And in the end, it just fizzled. I mean, literally in one day it fizzled out. So I was really down on that business, and I didn't, I was having a hard time outlining Interns, because I was thinking to myself, I don't want to just, write this and then give it to someone and hope that they like it, and then they show it to someone that we all hope likes it, and they show it to another person that we all hope likes it. This whole weird dysfunctional family tree that would have to sort of grow and come together, for someone to want to actually make it into a movie. And I had sold scripts and I had sold pitches, and the idea, because I loved this idea so much, the idea of just turning it over to someone, even if I was paid, and then having zero control over it, having it just kind of like sit on a shelf, which a lot of things have done are doing right now. I couldn't bear it. So that was when I decided to write it as a book. It was kind of scary because I have written a book before, but it was years ago. It was like when I was in film school, ironically in the early '90s. And I've always written journals, and I've always, worked on prose for years and years. But to actually sit down and write a novel was pretty daunting. But basically, like as soon as I got the courage to do it and sat down and did it, it was so fun and so enjoyable, as opposed to everything I'd ever done in the movie business, that I wrote it really quickly. I wrote it in I think I wrote the first draft in 60 days, because every night I was just pounding away at this thing and having a great time. So that's kind of another long story, I guess.
Sure. and what was the process at that point? I mean, did you have a literary agent, or did you go to your film agent in terms of getting the first one published, the Intern's Handbook?
Yeah, what I did is I don't have an agent anymore because I'm not a big believer in that for writers. I think they're good for like packaging and things like that for agents and actors, But I do have a manager, this guy, Brad Mendelson at Circle of Confusion. And so I went to Brad because I knew that he did a lot of work, like in his business, especially because he works in television. He did a lot of, book acquisitions and options and things like that. Usually it was him. He was the one who was optioning authors' books.
Right.
But I called him and I said, hey man, I want to write a book. And he said, cool. Okay. So automatically though, he said, I've got the perfect person for you to talk to about this woman, Hannah Gordon. And he's done business with Hannah for years, and they're very close, professionally. And, she was in New York at the time. She would do a trip to the West Coast a couple times a year to present material to him, for option, things like that. So I ended up contacting her, and she's very nice and smart and professional and easygoing. And she just said, okay, just write me a one-pager, sort of like outlining the concept and the character. And I did that immediately. I think I turned that around in 6 hours or something like that. Because I had all the material, I just had to distill it down. So I sent her that. I actually sent her, oddly enough, I sent her 2 one-pagers because I had this other novel that I also wanted to do, and that one's more autobiographical. But she's like, I love both of these. She's like, but she said, let's explore Intern's Handbook first, because the other one is, as I said, is somewhat autobiographical, and it's a much more complicated. It's more of a dramatic nonfiction genre book.
Right.
So she's like, okay, so to get you started, let's work on Intern, a less complicated affair. It's very close to what you've been doing in terms of narrative structure. And so I did an outline for her, and she called me and she said, wow, that's like the most detailed outline I think an author has ever sent me. So I sent her this 20-page beat by beat outline, something that I had done for scripts, usually that people require that. She loved it and thought it was amazing. And so she said, let's do this thing. And I think that was June. That was I think it was June of 2010. Yeah, don't quote me on dates. Yeah. I'm horrible with weights and measures, but yeah. So that was, it was early summer, and worked on the book all summer. And by end of August, we had a draft that we'd gone through and edited several times. And in September, that's when she took it out to publishers. So the process was, I guess all those years in the movie business did finally pay off, because it got me a connection with a great literary agent, a great book agent, and that's how it all kind of came together.
Got it. So what was the biggest difference you found between all those years of writing scripts and treatments and then sitting down and writing a novel?
The biggest difference, just on an emotional level, is enjoying writing versus hating writing. I mean, I'm a writer who, like, I'm compelled to write. I've been writing since I was 8 years old, and I always loved it when I was younger. You know, when I'd write prose, and poetry. I've written a lot of poetry, mainly because I never had time to do anything else. But over the years, that's what I enjoyed. And then I got into the movie business because my dad, you know, was like, "You're never going to make any damn money as a writer." And so I was like, how can I make some money doing this? And so and I love movies. So I thought, well, that's the perfect thing. You know, I can write for movies or TV, and then I can make my parents proud and all that stuff, you know? And so, but it really, like, the movie business really made me hate writing because, you know, the thing about art, no matter what it is the more people that are involved, the worse it gets. You know, it's like the art by committee thing. And the movie business is the pinnacle of that. So, like, you, as a writer, you're at the bottom of the totem pole. I mean, literally, I think craft services is like one notch above you. You know, so no one cares about you. Even if you're one of these $1 million like rewrite people, no one even knows those people's names. No one, they barely get any accolades or anything. But worse than that, in the creative process, they're really not considered at all, because, you know, film is a director's medium, period. You know, so basically, like, and also the working within film narrative is very structured and controlled, just format wise. You know, like if you're trying to tell if you're not doing experimental film, if you're trying to tell, like, what would be something you'd see in a movie theater, there's a structure to that you need to adhere to some degree. But beyond that, the movie business, because it's become so conservative, they actually also put a layer of creative structure on it. So, like, heroes can only do this and that, and they can't do this, and they can never say this, and they can never actually do certain actions, because Hollywood has their idea of what a hero is, or better yet, what a protagonist is. So it's wildly constraining. And once you think, okay, I've kind of figured this out, and you're doing it, then you start working with a committee of people who none of them agree, and art is, like, so incredibly subjective. So in the end, it becomes a total mess. You know, I don't see how any movies get made at all. It's just like it's funny, but also it's kind of not funny, because I literally could write a book about creative projects and what an incredible shit show they became, and how they started out as something great and just devolved into a total mess, you know? So that all speaks to, like, the enjoyment of the craft. And so I would say, just, you know, on a life level, on an emotional level, writing books, I love. I mean, like, I never thought I would say that I love to write again, but I love it so much. And it's not because I have, you know, like, total creative control and I'm some kind of, like, egomaniacal, you know, like, Napoleonic, you know, leader when it comes to that. But I do like to be able to express myself as freely as possible without a lot of interference from other people. And I love working with my editor, you know, because basically the difference with, like, you know, like, if you write a script and it's going around, it's doing the rounds with the committee, you know, they're basically changing everything you do many times without even asking you. Right. Book editors, they respect your work. You know, their motto, or their whole goal, their mandate, is to make sure that you are publishing the best expression of what you are trying to express, versus them trying to say, you know, I think it'd be better, instead of an assassin, he's a female photographer. You know, like, that's what the movie business is. They all think, oh, that's not a big change. You know, what's wrong with that? You know, so I don't know. Like, it's all about, like, loving the craft again. It's like, and if people want to really get an idea of what I'm talking about with the movie business, they should read Goldman's book, Adventures in the Screen Trade, because it's the perfect. Even though it's a bit dated because he talks about older movies, it's still all the same. It's still a perfect example of how that situation goes down in the movie business.
So are you planning to write more John Lago novels?
Yes, I'm planning to do that. I don't. What's unclear is whether is the publishing of those, because I mean basically Simon and Schuster, they're seeing how these do. They're seeing how they're accepted, obviously how well they sell, things like that, and they put. I'm very happy with the faith that they put into them. I mean, I know from talking to a lot of the authors, for them to greenlight a second book, with the first book barely even being out very long, took a lot of faith on their part, and I appreciate that. So in the end, the answer is I will not stop writing John Lago books. I'm hoping that we, with Simon and Schuster, we can continue, doing this. But I think if they were to determine that it isn't, necessarily like a profitable venture for them, I think I would still continue doing it, because I really do love this character. I feel like I have a lot of scenarios. I know for a fact I've got at least 6, more books, book concepts that I could start on tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
And also I'd like to do offshoots, like a lot of people on the book tour this time around have said, you really should write an Alice book. And I've thought about that before, but the more I hear people asking for it, the more I think it would be really cool. Because I do love that character, and there isn't a lot of in both books. There isn't a lot of information about her and her past. So I think it'd be really fun to delve into that. So yeah, I think it's going to live on until I run out of ideas.
Right. Right. Well, I wondered, you mentioned earlier about always liking assassins and the assassin genre. Are there films or books or authors that specifically inspired you when you were working on the 2 novels, Intern's Handbook and Hostile Takeover?
Yeah, I think if I'm going to, for me, film is a far bigger influence when it comes to genre than books, because the way I consume books is totally different. I read a lot of Chuck Palahniuk and Kurt Vonnegut. I don't necessarily go for thrillers and genre books, in that world. But for assassin stories, it's movies for me that have the most impact. And my favorites are The Professional and La Femme Nikita. And I have to throw The Day of the Jackal in there too, because I love the spectrum of if you take those 3 films, I love that spectrum that it offers, because you have The Day of the Jackal, which is a very, I don't want to say typical, but it's a very real kind of like, okay, and it's based on something real, so it's a very real interpretation of what how an assassin would operate.
Right.
It's methodical, and there's nothing all that exciting about it. If you see that movie, there are exciting moments, but it's very methodical type of thing to watch, because that's how in the real world, that's how it would have to be. If you're going to kill Charles de Gaulle, that's how an assassin would have to approach it. And so I love the realism of that particular film. And then you get into The Professional, where you're sort of like exiting realism a little bit, but you still are grounded to some extent. And also what I love about the character in that film is that he is the blank slate. Like you see those scenes where he's basically like got nothing in his apartment, and he's kind of invented himself, but he's got this one talent, which is like a very high level version of that talent, and I think what I really took away from The Professional is the assassin as ghost concept, which makes perfect sense to me, because the thing on James Bond, obviously he's not an assassin, but it's very difficult to be covert when you're going around telling everyone your name, that kind of thing. So what I love about that character is that he says, like when you're really good at this, you use a knife because no one can see you coming. So I think, there are definitely some stepping outside of realism in that movie. But at the same time, I think the portrayal of the assassin is very grounded. But then you get into La Femme Nikita, and what I really liked, that just kind of like blew my mind, because I loved how, I loved stories where quote unquote normal citizens become transformed into something like this. And it's an interesting way, the way Nikita becomes what she is. That's a very interesting process too, like the drug addict, drugstore cowgirl type thing, to this assassin. But I love how like they're, because she's a quote unquote normal person, unlike those other two characters, she still has her emotions. She still is that normal person emotionally. So you see what it does to her. You see like how it's just like, like the scene where she's just like her boyfriend is out in the hotel room. She's in the bathroom about ready to shoot someone with this incredibly bizarre, rifle that was hidden under the sink or whatever. And she's sobbing while she's doing it. It's like, I love that because of that, because she's like, she's a real person, and she had a chance to become a real person, and then became an assassin. So I think all of those, to me, that represents the sort of spectrum of things, because I think all those movies, have what I love about how the assassin is very powerful. It's like this kind of all powerful person. But at the same time, there are levels of that. And Nikita really, like the first, like the Professional and Day of the Jackal are what you'd expect of an assassin character, even those are great films. But Nikita is totally unexpected. And I think that kind of opened the door for a lot of different types of movies and books that could explore that. So it definitely was something for me too, because, when I was thinking about John, I was thinking about Nikita quite a bit, and how, that there are similarities there, at least in terms of them both having a somewhat emotional life and having, in being in this profession, and what it's done to them over time.
That's great. What's the status of the Intern's Handbook movie?
Currently, a couple of drafts of the script have been written, and they're looking for a director. And over the past like probably 3 months, they've been, the studio and also Original Film, Neil Moritz's company, they've been interviewing directors. A lot of directors really want to do this movie. And usually it's those who've read the book. And so they've been through this. It's kind of funny. It's like they've been through this kind of interview process where a lot of these directors, whose names I recognize, they're actually kind of like doing little presentations in the office and things like that to try to get the gig. So that's pretty cool. But they've narrowed it down to 2 candidates. I'm not allowed to say who they are right now, unfortunately. Yep. I wish I could, but I can tell you that they're very accomplished filmmakers. And I know their work, and I think their work is excellent. And it would be great to have either of them do it. It'd be very cool to have either of them do it. So basically, it's kind of like, I guess the decision is going to come down to the studio, and the studio and the producers are all debating which person to choose. So again, back to the committee. The committee is deciding on who will direct. But I've been told that there's a strong possibility they will have chosen somebody by the end of the summer, by the end of August. And knowing Neil, because I know Neil from other projects, Neil Moritz, I believe it to a certain extent, because Neil doesn't mess around. When he has a project, he gets it made, and that's what he's really working hard to do right now. So once that happens, once they choose a director, it'll be a game changer, because basically, even though the script is, a script has been written, what will probably happen, he often does, is the director will come in and just do their own rewrites. Which I'm kind of hoping they do, because in my opinion, the script is not faithful to the book. I think there are parts of it on a conceptual level that have, that share sort of similarities with the book, but in my opinion, it's too different. Mm-hmm. I feel like if you've read the book and you see the movie, I think the experience will be too different. And I'm not a fan of that. As a person who loves, like reading a book and then seeing the movie, although we can all agree, oftentimes it's a very disappointing process. Yeah. But like, for instance, Fight Club, I loved the book and I loved the movie. I maybe like the movie even more. But they're in step with each other. I mean, definitely David Fincher took a few liberties here and there, but I didn't feel alienated from the book when I saw the movie.
Sure.
And so what I told the studio, and I told, they asked my opinion, even though my opinion probably doesn't really matter that much, which is odd, right? So, when I've expressed my opinion, I've just said, I'd really love for this to be a lot closer to the book, because, that's kind of the point of doing this, right? It's like, if you guys really do love the book and you're motivated to make the movie, why don't we make it a lot more like the book? Which is really not that difficult to do, because I wrote the book in a 3-act structure. So, and I also have an outline that I've sent to them that shows that, and shows the story beats and how it could be structured easily to a script. But it's the committee, so they do things the way they do them, and all I can really do is sit back and hope that the end result is as close as possible to the book. But that's where we are in the process, is narrowing it down to a director, and once that happens, it'll kind of really open things up in terms of getting us on a faster track to production.
Great. Well, fingers crossed on the choice of a director. And we've been speaking with Shane Kuhn, author of Hostile Takeover, a brand new thriller novel. Go grab a copy today. And Shane, thanks for doing this interview.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Business as usual is a thing of the past, but the entrepreneurial spirit keeps us closing in on our dream. That's why U.S. Bank makes sure solutions are a conversation away, so we can help you adapt and evolve your business, no matter what comes up. Because even in uncertainty, you can be certain we have your back. U.S. Bank. We'll get there together. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.